Welcome everyone to the finals of the Esports World Cup 2025. The first set went in the favor of Magnus Carlsen here. He really dominated it without losing a single game. 3-1 was the score there, and now it's time for the second set in which Magnus has the black pieces here. Alireza has white. It's best of 4, 10 plus 0. And Alireza can make a fresh start now and try to make a comeback here. And I think it will be very interesting. This time format with no increment, playing online but in person in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia is what the Esports World Cup is all about. And I think it's a very interesting addition to the world of chess, which is going to make it very exciting in the years to come. But for now, the players are ready. It's time to get going. Alireza opens the game with d4, Magnus plays d5, g3 played, a little move. Magnus slightly surprised there, but I guess it may very soon transpose into the Catalan. Magnus taking his time here, not jumping into his move, goes knight to f6, bishop g2, c5 played, knight comes to f3, takes, and white castles h6 played, so that if white takes here, there's e5, b3 played, and now h5. This is well known, by the way. It has been played before. Bishop b2 is played here often to take the pawn on d4, but Alireza goes c3. A very interesting move. In fact, if you take here knight c3, knight c6, bishop f4, and white has excellent compensation in the spirit of Smith-Morra gambit, and you can see Magnus there quite impressed with that move. He goes knight c6, allows Alireza to capture on d4, bishop comes out to f5, and now knight to c3. It feels like black's position is slightly more cohesive with all the pieces placed here. The bishop on g2 looks a bit misplaced in this position. Alireza goes knight h4, and now pawn to e3 is played. Black plays his rook to c8, putting pressure on the c3 point, and Alireza can go rook c1, getting his rook also into c1, but goes knight a4. You can see how white has placed both his knights onto the corner of the board. Knight g4, offering a trade of knights here, Magnus. And I believe Alireza will take it, takes, queen takes. And now rook to c1 is a nice move, just getting the rook on the open file here. And Alireza is doing quite well. The position is around equal. Maybe you can already start thinking about jumping into c5. Maybe he comes back knight f3. But now Magnus also goes back knight to f6. Knight jumps to g5, attacking the bishop. And Magnus says, I'm not giving you that bishop. Bishop comes to f5 here. In general, this gives a vibe of exchange Slav, this entire structure. But if the bishop was on e2, not on g2, I think white would have been slightly better. Instead, now white is even slightly worse here. Knight jumps to c5, threatening knight takes pawn, rook takes c6. So the rook comes and defends the knight here. And Magnus wants to later on kick away this knight. Maybe jump with his knight somewhere. Let's see how this shapes up. Time wise, you can see Alireza using more time. He has 4 minutes 41 seconds. Magnus has 8 minutes. Rook c3 played. And now a very good move. Knight to b4, putting pressure here on the c file. a3, asking a question to the knight. But now the knight can go back to a6, and you can't take here as the knight rook on c3 is hanging. So Firouzja tries to defend the knight on c5. Magnus attacks it again, taking advantage of this pin, and Alireza goes back to a4. Queen comes to d7, attacking this knight. And you can see Magnus looking relaxed there, has 7 minutes on the clock. Alireza down to 3 minutes 30 seconds. He is definitely bleeding here. Rook takes, queen takes, taken, and now c file is in Magnus's control. b4, b5 played, knight jumps back, can come back into the game via d7, queen comes to b4. Alireza trying to be active here, But now knight d7, let's get the last piece into the game, which is not playing here. 6 minutes 50 seconds for Magnus, 2 minutes 29 seconds for Alireza Firouzja. And queen to b4 played. Knight comes to d7. And now f3. Firouzja, good or bad, wants to break in the center, activating the rook. Well, while this move does look dubious and weakens the second rank the queen can enter in, it actually is practically pretty decent decision. I mean, it's just that Magnus is so strong. He's going to find this move queen c2, which is very, very powerful. I think he goes bishop d3 instead, which is perhaps not the most accurate way to continue. Knight jumps to f8. Could be that Magnus just wants to trade off this active knight on g5. Knight comes to b2, attacking the bishop here. Bishop goes back to g6. And now bishop f1. I like this move. Just controlling certain light squares here. Queen comes into c2. Excellent chess. And now knight d1. Firouzja maneuvering his knight from a4 nicely. Wants to go to f2 square. The other knight will maybe come back to h3 to f4. Knight h7. Yes, he doesn't trade. Bishop f5. Attacking the knight here. And maybe get this knight back to f2. He goes ndf2. But now the rook can enter here. Rook c3 is a very, very strong move. Attacking the pawn on e3, other pawn on a3. This seems like a good move. g5 played. So he's pushing his pawn to g5. And pawn to e4. Now very important to take on h3. Well, but he takes on e4 once. And now Magnus shouldn't take the pawn on e4. That's a deep trap by Alireza with just 36 seconds on the clock. Magnus blunders. And I think he's missed this rook e2 move, which is very subtle. Because if you take here, bishop takes, black is doing completely fine. But this move, rook e2, is just insanely strong. Let's see if Alireza finds it. Down to 24 seconds, finds it. Rook e2, and I think for Magnus, the problem is the queen can no longer be on this diagonal to protect the knight. And look at that expression of Magnus. Slowly, it's dawning on him that he's going to lose a piece. Oh my god. Alireza, what a guy. But with 24 seconds on the clock with no increment, can he survive this? Magnus sacks the queen. Takes, bishop takes, d5 instantly played. Alireza is 22 seconds, bishop g2, maybe d6 was stronger. Takes, bishop takes. Black has to get rook c5 in to activate his rook. Here, Magnus 3 minutes 17 seconds, both players shaking their heads. Knight f6, bishop c6 found by Alireza with 17 seconds on the clock. He's playing insane chess. If he manages to win this, I would be amazed. Queen e7 played by Firouzja. 1 second invested. a5 played, you can't take. The bishop is hanging. Rook queen goes here. Rook d8, he takes the pawn. Check, king moves up. Down to 13.8 seconds. King, rook takes h2. Firouzja brings his queen to c5. He's going to push the b pawn down the board. h4, b6. Oh, what speed. Firouzja has 11 seconds. He's making so many moves. b7 with just 0.4 seconds taken there. Magnus can't stop the b pawn and he's like g2 takes here, rook takes. Unbelievable here. Check. Queen takes g3 taken, and Magnus Carlsen is so upset with this entire thing. He's like, how the hell did I miss this? And Alireza Firouzja showing why he's considered one of the best speed players in the world of chess.